Towson, Baltimore, taking my remote control, but all eyes on the Terps, and certainly they're heading down to Orlando with a chance. That's all you can hope for. This guy lives here in Baltimore, doing the national thing these days. He is down in Orlando ahead of the Storm. No shoveling for Evan Washburn from CBS Sports and the CBS Sports Network. He'll be calling the action there on the floor in Orlando, along with our old pal Ian Eagle as well. What's going on, Evan? How's life? I mean, this is a nice assignment. Dude, you could have gotten Buffalo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I appreciate the location. It still meant getting out on the road early to beat the Storm to get down here, but you can't beat the chance to be in Florida this time of the year. But the truth is, Nestor, and you know this from covering this tournament, you're spending a lot of time in an arena watching some great basketball, so it really doesn't matter where you are. But I'm more psyched about the fact that we've got some good matchups here on Thursday, so that's the fun part.
Well, you could have gotten any of these pods, and you're sort of the Baltimore guy, and, Ian's my old buddy, so I'm calling you guys this week. I know you get more than a cursory look at the Terps. I mean, maybe more so than some of these, FGCU or,
Sure.
Some of these other teams you're going to see, like UNC Wilmington, you may have seen roll through Baltimore at some point this year. But, when it comes to the Terps and Xavier, we've seen the Terps all year long. It's Jekyll Hyde. Are we going to see that crap that showed up last Friday night in the Big Ten tournament? Or are we going to see Melo hitting shots and them not having to worry about rebounding so much, which I quite frankly don't think they're ever going to be good at given their size?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to take some things and accept them, and I think the rebounding is one of those, especially where they are with the injuries. I think what impresses me most about Maryland is really that they're in this position and at times, at their best, have shown that being on the road, being at neutral sites, doesn't intimidate this group. Now, this is an entirely different animal. It is a unique situation to walk into the NCAA tournament. So how such a young team that plays and relies on so many freshmen handles that will be interesting. Now, they go up against the Xavier team, who I actually have seen in person, got to cover them earlier in the year. And they, much like Maryland, dealt with some injury. They're getting their key player back, Trayvon Blewett, who, if you've seen him play, he's an NBA caliber player. So I think that the matchup maybe favors Maryland in a situation where there could be some sort of figuring out what it's like to play in the NCAA tournament for some young guys, because I don't think Xavier's going to come into this game ready to blow their doors open. But it should be interesting to see what Melo can do, because for all the experience they lack, Melo has that, and he's been at his best really in some of these NCAA tournament games. As you know, he likes to be on that big stage.
Well, and he wants to be on the biggest stage, NBA night, and get a ball cap there in the first round at some point. I don't think he's that guy right now, but a 4-game run of his leadership, hitting big shots and scoring 28 points and not carrying the ball like a loaf of bread like he did against Northwestern down in D.C. on Friday night, that would go a long way. This would have been a better game in January, right? I mean, before the injuries, Tchaikovsky notwithstanding, and certainly for Xavier, losing their guard was kind of everything. I mean, the only team they've beaten recently is DePaul. I mean, they are, if you're looking for a team that's scuffling more than Maryland, this might be the one.
That's my point. I think if you're a Maryland fan, all your concerns that come from the way they played against Northwestern and really the way that they've played the last 10 games, the one solace you can take is that you're going up against a team that's reeling as well. But it's really tough to do the prediction game at this tournament because it is such a different environment, even more so than a conference tournament. I mean, to see what Maryland didn't play well in on Friday night in D.C. in a de facto home game, they're heading into what will be the early game, as I remember it, or the early evening game, which means it's the transition of crowd. So that place could be quiet.
It's going to be quiet. I don't think there's any. I mean, you and I have done this long enough. I mean, all my childhood, I grew up wanting to go to NCAA tournament games, and then sometime in the late '80s, I started going to games. In Maryland, and I went to games at the Omni in Atlanta. I mean, strange places, and there's never vibe. It's a great television event, and that's why you're there broadcasting it for everybody. But from a vibe standpoint, inside the gym, that's what made the Verizon Center so crazy on Friday night. It was Evan. It wasn't like a home game or de facto home game. It was a home game with beer at 9 o'clock on a Friday night in D.C., where everybody got a chance to get down there. I mean, it was electric in that building. Everything was electric except the way they played.
Yeah, and that first evening session is often the one that is the most, the lack of energy and emotion. But all that really, Nestor, to me, is sort of secondary to the fact that really the teams that play well, hit some shots, don't get bogged down by anything early in a game are usually the ones that come out and win and kind of get through that initial portion of the game that can be a little disjointed because it is different. The commercial times are longer. The games are longer. So whoever handles that better, to me, when you're talking about two teams that are probably equal in whatever department in University of Maryland and Xavier, that's usually a team that's going to play well. I just like the fact that Maryland has Melo Trimble and then Xavier has Trayvon Blewett, and it's two players that are of NBA caliber or professional basketball caliber, and at this point, you want to rely on your stars, and these two teams have one.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we talked so much about Melo earlier in the year when he's hitting big shots in games they probably shouldn't have won, before they even got into the Big Ten schedule. And then, kind of got lost in the shuffle during the bad games, even scored a lot in a couple of the losses, those home losses that were hideous a couple of weeks ago. But, now it's go time, right? I mean, this is it. This will define his career at Maryland one way or another. And given the draw, Evan, Xavier and then maybe Florida State, the whole notion that they didn't get penalized for getting their ass kicked at home in the Big Ten tournament last week, and with teams like Michigan sort of surging ahead, I'm shocked Maryland's a 6 seed. I thought they'd be a 7 or an 8 or maybe even worse, like a 9 or a 10, and sort of the punishment that Wisconsin got at that point, and some other schools that have been punished. There's no punishment here. I mean, seeing Florida State instead of potentially seeing Louisville or Duke or someone like that before the weekend's over, that's the undoing of them, right? I mean, they're not going to beat one of these 1 or 2 seeds, I don't think. But boy, they could certainly do a little workaround and find themselves in San Jose next week, maybe seeing Arizona, which if they were to get to that point wouldn't be intimidating because it would mean that Melo's hitting shots, and Herter's hitting shots, and Dodd's participating, and, it would mean incredible things if they can just get through the weekend because we have seen them play well enough to win a couple of games like this in Orlando.
Of course. And I mean, and as a guy, as you mentioned off the top, I live in the area, but I'll admit I am not living and dying by every University of Maryland basketball game just because of so many other things I'm covering and being on the road so much, but I obviously keep a close eye to them. And to me, when they were at their best and running through that first start of the season where they had such a strong start, I mean, I've chalked it up as Mark Turgeon having one of his better years based off of expectations and coming off of what they lost after last year. And I think all that is still part of the conversation.
Yeah, the kids can play. I mean, Jackson's hitting shots the other night. He looked like he had never shot a ball in an NBA arena. I mean, literally, and maybe he hasn't so much, right? I mean,
you're going to deal with those things with freshmen, and that's got to be your concern going into the NCAA tournament, that you can't count on these young guys to necessarily be at their best immediately upon starting in an odd situation, an odd environment, with all the challenges that are presented. But that's where I think it falls back on Melo, and then if you're Xavier, who's got a bit more experience throughout the roster, but I think Maryland's probably a more talented roster. Xavier's got a little bit more experience, having been in the tournament and having some older guys. That's where those things have to even out, and execution becomes critical. Margin for error shrinks, as we all know. But to be honest with you, man, I think that this, as you kind of tried to look ahead, I think that this draw for them and really this whole pod, as that's where my focus lies, is one where there's a lot of question, and that's the fun part. I don't see any of these matchups. Getting to learn, I mean, having East Tennessee State and what they're capable of doing against a team like Florida is intriguing. So, and then you talk about Florida State, yeah, but they got to get through Florida Gulf Coast, who has a bit of that group that we saw going to run last year. They got Andy Enfield, that USC job. So it's going to be my hope is it'll be a wild Thursday because I think that it has that feel.
He is Evan Washburn. He will be in Orlando doing all the good stuff out on your CBS television dial all weekend long. I'm telling people, man, it's True TV's weekend. It's the iPad. It's the sports bar. It's the pizza. It's the wings. You guys are definitely in the middle of it. Kind of exciting for you on a professional level. I mean, I feel like I've known you since you were a kid up and, doing this. And I know we talked about the Super Bowl in the past, but, after the Super Bowl, there's things like this that are still pretty cool to do. And there were 8 different places you could have been sent. This is not a bad bracket at all, and I think it'll be well attended. The Florida side of this thing could certainly come crashing down on Maryland as you talk about the Florida State thing, but this is a lot of fun to do this stuff, right?
It really is, and I'm glad you brought it up because as a guy who's been in the business for a while, as you know, and done big things, all we care about is being associated and being around big events. And look, football is my priority. The NFL is where I like to make a living and really invest most of my time and effort, but the fact that I get to into college basketball at the tail end of the year for some regular season games and then get to do the tournament for the first weekend is an honor because, again, it's a big-time event, special things happen, and at the end of the day, we're just sports fans, so we want to just be around those things. So it's always fun to sort of give listeners and viewers a chance to know, and I know you talked to Ian, who's the best there is. It's even harder for him, but getting to know 8 teams in a course of 3 days here, because we found out Sunday night, just like everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like you were studying ahead of time, right? I mean,
yeah, we have no idea. So it brings back nightmares of college, but on the front end, it's the cool thing is being a part of something that really brings all sports fans together for a few days, Thursday, Friday, when everybody's trying to skip out on work.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. A lot of Florida angle down there as well. The Florida State thing's fascinating from Maryland's perspective because of the old ACC thing. And then, on the other side, seeing Virginia as well. But a lot of people were pulling for a Duke second-round thing. For me, I'm happy to be avoiding that. And if you could give me any of the ACC teams, historically, we've never feared Florida State around here. Maybe going back to Pat Kennedy. And I know that they also had an incredible run. And earlier in the year, several of these teams played their best basketball in January. And here it is March,
Yeah, it's a great point. Looking at what Florida did with Florida State, a lot of these teams got themselves into the tournament with the work that they did in December and January, not necessarily in February and early March. So it provides for some question about them, especially those that are going up against these higher seeds. The Floridas against the East Tennessee States and then Florida State against Florida Gulf Coast. Hey, how good is this team now? They haven't looked good down the stretch. So, again, that's why I'm hopeful that it makes for because you always just root for your pod to be the one where all the wackiness happens.
Evan Washburn can be followed out on Twitter at Evan Washburn. He will be on television on Thursday and Saturday from Orlando. Hopefully we're still watching on Saturday, and my pool doesn't become a puddle before 9:15 on Thursday night. Terps taking on Xavier, and then hopefully the winner of Florida State and FGCU, who had a little Cinderella slipper at one point recently as well. I'll get to the NFL, because, you do live here in Baltimore, and I know, as you said, our bread is buttered on all that. And, dude, I've been talking more Wizards this week, and Capitals and Terps and spring training. The World Baseball Classic's great. We'll be watching that between the basketball over the weekend. But, it's a football world. We got this London trip on sale. The schedules are coming out. But free agency from the Ravens' perspective, I swear if I would have gone into the building last week and asked people, will Brandon Williams really be a Raven this year, I think you would have seen grave skepticism on the part of a lot of people, because I think you always believe there's going to be something overwhelming happening because there's so much money in free agency. And so many teams, the bad teams last year, Jacksonville, Oakland, this year, Cleveland, store up that money. And I would have thought that Juszczyk would have been okay and would have been safe, and you could hide an H-back, fullback kind of guy. But, as the worm turns a week later, Brandon Williams is signed up and teary-eyed, and I think the Ravens are better for it. I'm very happy he's sticking around. But it is a sticky period where it's unpredictable what the marketplace is going to bear out for free agents.
I've never enjoyed it more, and it was tough because I was actually out doing a conference tournament in Vegas, the Mountain West Conference Tournament, so I'm kind of keeping tabs on free agents.
Vegas, where the Raiders play, right?
Yeah, we'll see. But I thought I couldn't have been more pleased because I'm not, while I'm close to the team, I get to host the show weekly, I really do remove myself from the fan department, but I just think for that organization, that was the move that they needed to make. That They are desperate for one of these young players that they've done a nice job drafting to not go somewhere else. They need that new wave of identifiable players that can galvanize that locker room, and especially on the defensive side of the ball where so much of this organization's identity is built. And getting to know Brandon Williams over the last couple of years, hosting a couple of events, and then obviously just watching his play, he's that kind of guy.
He's a special dude. He really is. He's a unique.
Really is.
He's a unique, special guy.
His story, but the most important thing, Nestor, and you know this, is he can play, and he's a difference maker on the field. And I just feel like had they lost him, and maybe look, they could have possibly overpaid. Who knows? But
you always overpay, right? You're the highest bidder. That's what it is.
His worth was beyond what he did on the football field. I feel like one of the things that teams lacked since obviously Ray retired and Ed, I know Suggs is still there, but his role has almost seemed to shift to now he's kind of this overseer of things. There needed to be a sense that somebody was coming up, and I couldn't think anyone better than Brandon Williams. So that made total sense to me. I thought Juszczyk was gone. He was going to get paid. I'm happy for the guy, nice guy, but to me, there's no need to pay a fullback, that much money
in this offense. He can't earn his money in this offense.
Yeah, he's valuable, but I think the hope is for Ravens fans and those that want to see this offense open up is that Juszczyk isn't as critical as he has been in years past. I think that's almost an indictment on where this offense has been. So it's been wild. I mean, and this is aside from the Ravens, but watching what New England's done has been like, whew, if they're not just re-racking to try and do this thing again.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy, and they might wind up flipping out Garoppolo too, right?
For them too. They do their damage in free agency 3-4 weeks into the thing. They're not usually the first week big game hunters, but they've been on a tear. It's been a lot of fun. But
well, they certainly have a lot of latitude, right?
For the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a team that could take some risks, the Patriots have that latitude at this point to be able to do that at any point, whether it's cutting Jamie Collins or not.
They usually live by, and some of these moves to me. And look, I'm not that intimately aware. I don't think any of us are of how they do their business. That's what makes them so good. But this does seem a bit out of character in terms of some of the money they've thrown at guys like Stephon Gilmore and even Lawrence Guy, a defensive tackle who was effective for the Ravens, is getting 4 years, $20 million.
Well, the situation with a wide receiver and finding a guy for Brady, that felt like that was priority one, and they nailed that and snapped that off. And, hey, part of all of this is stockpiling the draft picks, right? Having the powder in the keg, or, the Browns bringing over opportunities from the baseball side of saying, what do we have that's available? The Garoppolo thing makes it even more interesting because this quarterback market over the next 5 or 6 weeks before the draft, it's not going to be about the draft. It's really going to be about these retreads. I mean, Buffalo turtled right back up and ran back and took Tyrod because they didn't want to dip their toe into the unknown. The unknown is Jay Cutler, and that's still unknown, Evan.
Yeah, the quarterback dictates so much of this, and I'm not surprised. I think they probably have, my guess, and this is complete conjecture and just opinion more than like educated fact, but they have a price, and I just don't think anyone's really wanted to give it to them yet for Garoppolo.
Well, you still got 5 weeks to get it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still time. Yeah, we'll see. He is Evan Washburn. You can follow him out on Twitter at Evan Washburn. He will be resting the pipes with Mickey and Minnie and Donald down there in Orlando, calling all things Terps. Hey, man, nice little trip for the Terps fans, though, right? I mean, if you could get out around the snowstorm on Tuesday, first round little visit to Florida, not a bad gig if you're in the Terps fan club or the M club there, right?
There could be worse places to go, for sure. You mentioned Buffalo off the top. Love that city, but right now doesn't offer much more than hiding in the arena. So, yeah, I'm sure the Maryland faithful will find a way to get down here because they do always seem to travel well, and we hope so. Because, as you mentioned, at sometimes it can be a different type of atmosphere. So I'm thinking with the Florida teams and then a team like Maryland that travels, we should be in good shape.
Get a little energy in that building down there. All right, man, we'll see you soon. Keep up the great work out there. We'll be following you along during the Ravens season as well, hosting some midweek shoulder fun programming of conversation with Ravens players. Hopefully we'll get you some new players here. I mean, we get up to Philadelphia in a couple of weeks. This draft's going to be pretty important, no doubt about it.
I think so. Always good to be with you.
You got it. Evan Washburn joining us here from CBS. You can find him at Evan Washburn out on Twitter as well. He will be with the Iron Eagles team down in Orlando for a pretty good little pod of 8 teams down there. We will be watching all weekend long. If there's any breaking news out of Orlando or out of Sarasota or the World Baseball Classic or with the Ravens signing more players, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Nasty at WNST.net finds me, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNS TV channel. Reminder, head coach Barry Trotz of the Washington Capitals with us on Monday night at Greenmount Station in Hampstead. We will be up there at 7 p.m., all for the bone marrow registry, and for There Goes My Hero. We will be swabbing for blood cancer patients around the world. Come on out, get on the registry, say hello to the coach, bring your red, rock your red, and hopefully the Caps get the ship righted here later on in the week after a ugly trip to California, man. That's all I'm going to say. We'll write that one off. I was watching the Wizards, too. Terps keeping us awake. Orioles keeping us up. And obviously the Ravens keeping us on our toes with free agency. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.